Have you ever felt like your value is measured not by your soul, your ideas, or your care, but by your constant availability? Not your depth, not your intuition, not your essence, just your access. You're always there, always reachable, always ready. And that's exactly why they don't recognize the cost of your presence, because you've become invisible in your consistency. Familiarity diluted your significance. They don't pause to ask how you're doing. They assume you're always okay because you've trained them to. They reach out when they're crumbling, when they're craving comfort, when silence gets too loud and loneliness too sharp. They come to you when their world is unsteady because you've always been steady. They don't even question it. You're their anchor, their fallback, the soft cushion that absorbs impact over and over again. And you show up even when your heart is heavy, even when you feel invisible, even when you're barely holding yourself together, even when all you want is for someone to see that you're not okay. They don't check in, they don't pause, they don't ask, they never ask, because in their eyes, you've become convenient, not complexity, not humanity, not someone in need of care, but a utility, a soothing voice, a reliable echo, someone who holds the world together without falling apart. You're the safe space they take for granted, the constant presence that's mistaken for endless capacity. They see your openness not as courage but as currency, and when you finally grow quiet, they call you distant. When you finally set boundaries, they call you selfish. They forgot you had a threshold because you never let them see it. Not because they're heartless, but repetition teaches behavior, and you've taught them that you'll always answer, that your yes isn't earned, it's expected, that you'll never choose yourself over them, that your availability is a default setting. You've blurred the line between support and sacrifice. You've blurred the line between loyalty and self-neglect. You've blurred the line between presence and performance. You confuse being indispensable with being loved. You confuse being included with being respected. You confuse being needed with being cherished. But a person who is only loved for what they give is not truly loved at all, loved at. But deep down, you know something is wrong. You know your soul sighs every time you smile when you don't mean it, every time you nod when your heart whispers no, every time your silence covers up the ache of self-abandonment, every time your voice dies in your throat to keep the peace that leaves you in pieces. You are not just tired, you are depleted, worn from stretching yourself to fit expectations you never agreed to, fractured from handing out fragments of yourself until there's barely anything left to hold. You show up in spaces where you are barely acknowledged. You remain in conversations where you are not truly heard. You stand beside people who disappear the moment you need a hand. And even then, you still return, hoping this time will be different. This isn't connection, this is erosion, and it's wearing you down, softly, slowly, repeatedly. You say yes to stay needed. You stay to stay remembered. You overextend because your absence terrifies you more than your exhaustion. You fear what it might mean if you stop being useful, because you've tied your identity to your service. But the hard truth, you were never really seen. You were tolerated, utilized, expected, but never truly known, never truly met, never truly valued for your essence, only your utility. You were just access, and that truth, it's not an insult, it's a revelation. It's the knock at the door of your own self-worth. It's the awakening your soul has been waiting for, because the version of you who is always available, the one who runs when called, who sacrifices her truth for connection, is gasping. She's drowning beneath the weight of everyone else's needs. And the real you, the one who knows that respect begins with boundaries, that love is not tested by depletion, that visibility is not earned through exhaustion, that truth never demands self-erasure. That version of you is still alive, still waiting, still whispering, beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, beneath the mask of the helper. Let's go find her. Let's go return to the self who doesn't need to prove her worth by being everywhere, for everyone, all the time. Let's begin. Carl Jung once said people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. You became their way to avoid it. When someone needed comfort, they came to you. When someone needed praise, they called you. When someone needed an audience for their chaos, you listened. When someone needed to vent, to cry, to offload their storm, they knew where to go, straight to your doorstep of endless empathy. And you told yourself, this is love, this is connection, this is what it means to be a good person. But you weren't connecting, you were performing, you weren't being authentic, you were shape-shifting into safety, you weren't being good, you were disappearing piece by piece. Every yes was a small death, every smile a silent scream, every conversation another moment you didn't speak your truth, every helpful gesture another brick in the wall you were building around your authenticity. You became emotionally fluent in everyone else's language and forgot how to speak your own. You memorized their weather patterns and ignored your own internal storms. You knew how to navigate their rage, their sadness, their silence, yet stood helpless before your own longing. You forgot what your voice sounded like. You forgot what your boundaries felt like. You forgot that you had needs of your own, buried beneath the noise of everyone else's emergencies. You know their needs, their wounds, their patterns. But do you know yours? Do you even remember the last time you asked yourself what you needed, what you wanted to say, what you wanted to feel? You built a life on emotional hospitality, always hosting, never hosted. You made a home for everyone else's mess. And now, you're a ghost in your own home. You walk the halls of your own life like a stranger. Your soul leaves breadcrumbs of truth, but you're too busy tidying up others' chaos to follow them back to yourself. Your nervous system is frayed, hyper-aware, hyper-available, hyper-responsible. Your body registers every vibration, every shift in tone, every unread message like a call to arms. Your breath shortens, your shoulders tighten, your mind races with how to fix, solve, support. You check your phone like it's a lifeline. You jump at every ping, every "can you talk?" and your body braces. For what? You're not even sure anymore. You feel an unnamed dread, like you're always one text away from emotional obligation. Peace feels foreign. Stillness feels selfish. Boundaries feel like betrayal. Solitude feels dangerous, not because it is, but because you've been taught to equate it with failure, with disconnection. You weren't taught boundaries, you were taught compliance. You weren't taught to protect your energy, you were taught to be agreeable. You weren't shown how to honor your needs, you were shown how to anticipate theirs. You weren't told your value lies in your essence. You were conditioned to believe it lies in your sacrifice. So now when you say no, you feel like the villain. When you don't answer, you feel like you're abandoning someone. When you choose yourself, guilt comes rushing in like a tide. Even rest feels like a rebellion. But what about the times they abandoned you? The calls that went unanswered? The silence when you needed support? The way your pain was met with platitudes? Or worse, nothing at all? The times your tears were too much or your needs were inconvenient? Why do you excuse their absence and crucify your own? Why do you justify their patterns while punishing your pause? Why do you water dead plants and call it loyalty? Because somewhere along the way, you learned that your worth is in your utility. Not your essence, not your boundaries, not your presence, just your usefulness. But you're not a tool. You're not a solution. You're not a therapist to the emotionally unavailable. You're not an emergency exit for their dysfunction. You're not a safe harbor for every storm that isn't yours. You are a person with depth, with fragility, with limits, with a soul that deserves sanctuary, with a voice that deserves space, with a body that deserves rest. And you have the right to protect your peace, to withdraw, to be unreachable, to stop performing wellness while you're unraveling inside, to let others carry their own weight for once, even if they don't understand, even if they get upset, even if they leave, because that is their journey, not your responsibility, because the ones who only stay when you're accessible were never really with you to begin with. They loved the version of you that never needed anything back. They adored your silence because it left room for their volume. They depended on your compliance because it made them comfortable. But now, you are not here to be consumed. You are here to be known, fully, gently, honestly, lovingly. And that begins with stepping away from those who only see you when you're giving and returning to yourself, the one who's been waiting for a place to rest, the one who's been whispering beneath the noise, "Come home. I've missed you." Let them call you distant. Let them say you've changed. Let them label your silence as cold, because silence is sacred, because distance is divine, because change is your birthright, because returning to yourself will always feel like rebellion in a world that profits from your performance. You don't owe anyone constant access. You don't owe everyone your presence. You don't owe your energy to those who only notice your absence, never your essence. You don't need to explain your evolution. You don't need to justify your quiet. You don't need to make your boundaries digestible to those who only benefited from your lack of them. This is your reclamation, not with a scream, not with rage, but with a whisper, one that echoes through your entire nervous system. No more. You choose when to answer. You choose when to speak. You choose when to give. You choose how to protect your peace, not out of spite, but from self-respect. Because the door to your soul is not public property, it is sacred space, and from now on, only those who knock with reverence, not entitlement, will enter. Not everyone will understand this version of you. The quieter one, the one who rests before she breaks, the one who doesn't jump when called, the one who honors her thresholds. But this version, this is the one who finally comes home. Home to stillness, home to discernment, home to presence, home to the sacred truth that you are not made to be available 24/7. You're not cold, you're not cruel, you're clear. And clarity is a language not everyone speaks, and clarity isn't always comfortable, but it's always clean. So let this be your reminder. You are not a backup plan. You are not a lifeline. You are not accessible on demand. You are not the emotional infrastructure for people who refuse to build their own. You are a living, breathing soul, not an emotional vending machine, not a soothing echo, not the character in someone else's crisis narrative. If this spoke to you, write it in the comments. I choose presence over performance. And if you're ready to keep coming home to yourself, the next video will take you deeper into the sacred art of detachment, deeper into the peace you stopped believing was possible, because you deserve more than applause for exhaustion. You deserve rest that doesn't feel like guilt. Let them chase urgency. Let them crave reaction. Let them spiral in their chaos. Let them learn to sit with their own silence. You choose stillness. You choose awareness. You choose intentionality. You choose to no longer perform wholeness while hollow inside, because being available to everyone was costing you yourself. And the most sacred thing you can offer now is your absence from anything that asks you to abandon who you are. This is the boundary. This is the revolution. This is the sacred withdrawal that becomes your resurrection. This is you coming back into your own gravity and never orbiting anyone else again.